I'm now a 41-year-old female, but when I was 20 years old, I attended college in Northeast Pennsylvania. I lived off campus and had a part-time job at the local mall. The mall was just over a mile away, and I would walk to and from work regularly. The mall generally closed at 9 p.m., and I would finish up my closing tasks and start walking home around 9:30 p.m. or 10 at the latest. Occasionally, I would get a ride home from a coworker, but most of them were high schoolers getting picked up by their parents. One night, I was walking my familiar route home. There are never many people out and about downtown until I got back onto campus, which I would cut across to get home. This night, I was only a few blocks from the mall, and I noticed a van parked next to the corner, but didn't think anything of it initially. There were always a smattering of cars parked around. The van appeared to be running, and the headlights were on. As I got a bit closer, I noticed the sliding door on the side was open. I definitely noticed, but assumed that someone must be loading something in and out of one of the local businesses along the street. As I walked past the van, there's a sudden flurry of movement to my left. There had apparently been a man crouched by the dumpster there, and he was running straight at the open van door. The scary part was that I was directly between him and the open van door. He was trying to shove me inside the van. I screamed, and I can only credit my complete awkward lack of coordination for what happened next. I tripped and stumbled when he surprised me, so when he hit me, I was already falling down to the ground. The force he hit me with only got my head and shoulders into the open door, while the majority of my body was outside on the ground. I remember he grabbed me around the waist and was trying to hoist me up through the door, but I was just discombobulated dead weight. He jumped over me into the van, grabbed a handful of my hair and started pulling me off the ground into his van. This is when headlights of a car turning down the street washed over me, and I could briefly see that this was a white guy in a black hoodie. When I saw the car, I screamed louder and started wildly flailing my arms. I heard their brakes screech, and then the guy let go of my hair. I jumped back and the hooded bastard slammed the door shut, and seconds later accelerated away. A cute little white-haired Polish woman had been in the car that turned down the road at the exact right moment to save me. She hugged me and told me I was safe, and it was then that I realized I was still screaming. She sat on the sidewalk with me and then walked me to her car. Cell phones were relatively new. Neither of us had one. She drove me to the police station and stayed with me while I answered questions and made a report. As far as I know, they never caught the guy. My housemate with a car let me borrow it anytime I was going to work after that, and I never walked downtown after that. I had nightmares for a while. I can't help but think what could have happened to me. Hello, my name is Alex, and here's my story. At the time, I was in my old bedroom, which was basically one of the smallest rooms in the house. I am now in a new bedroom. This one is way more spacious. My bedroom was about 5 meters by 5 meters. It could only fit a bed, 2 nightstands, and a dresser with a mirror screwed on top. It was in the basement. Now most of you guys probably think that the basement is dark, creepy, and eerie, but mine was not. My parents had made sure it was full of life as possible. They painted the walls, installed a gaming room, which I used often, basically making it really cool if someone in our family wanted to have a party there. Now the room I think it was actually fair I had that one room, because before we moved houses, both my brothers had to sleep in a tiny bedroom, about 5 square feet large. Basically the worst, and I had the biggest room in the whole house. So at the time, we had 3 cats. One of the 3 was my favorite. I loved her and took care of her, and she made sure I wasn't depressed. Sometimes we would just let her go outside during the night, and I would let her go in sometimes when she scratched on my window. She still does this to this day. I was an insomniac, and I never slept well. My parents knew about it, so they decided to give me some melatonin pills to help me sleep. My window was on the top of my bedroom wall, which meant my cat didn't need to hop on any type of ledge to scratch her paws on it from the outside, letting me know she wanted to get in. It was a night that I decided to take some melatonin pills, which worked fantastically when I couldn't sleep. So I was literally about to sleep, like I was on the edge of dreaming, and I heard my cat scratch, or so I thought. I sighed, got up to move the curtains out of the way so I could let her in, but when I opened the window, I heard something move or step on the rocks around my window. At the time, I was too sleepy to realize it wasn't my cat's footsteps that I heard, but a human's. So, as a normal person, I yelled my cat's name, put my hand out the window to tap on the ground, as such to let my cat know that she could come to get in. That was my mistake. In no time, I heard footsteps coming straight to the window, and I felt a man's hand grab my arm and start to pull me out the window. I started screaming for someone to come and help, but no one came. I felt the adrenaline instantly rush to my body and quickly grabbed a sharp object. I believe it was a dirty knife covered in old food. I stabbed the guy's hand. Blood dripped out as I heard a blood-curdling scream, the scream that I will remember for my whole life. The man quickly ran away as fast as he could, and I fell back on my bed. I opened my door and ran as fast as I could to my parents' bedroom to tell them the horror story I just lived. They woke up fast and called the cops, reassuring me that I was safe and everything, caring for my horrible wound from the man's grip on my arm. The cops arrived at my house and I told them what happened. I was still laced with adrenaline. My words were not sounding clear. With the man's blood that was left on the knife, they managed to get his name and where he lived. They followed up with us and told us that he got arrested for attempted kidnapping and that he's already been charged with many other crimes before. I am still traumatized to this day. My friend and I, both 21-year-old females, went to Applebee's for a few $1 margaritas, then went off to a park where she said she knew a spot. We go 20 minutes away to this park. We go down this path that takes us around 10 minutes to the Bay Area. We find a nice log to sit there and watch the sunset. As we were relaxing on the log, a family strolls by with their dog to hang out on the other side of the shore. A few minutes go by and a couple comes through and sets up. They eat a big pineapple with a knife. The sun sets, but it's still light out, and we didn't think about the walk back. Eventually, we go to head back, and it's dark. The wooded area we had to walk through is getting really dark. As we are walking, she gets her phone camera out, as it's pitch black at this point. We start talking about how creepy it was. I felt an uneasy feeling, that feeling you get, afraid that someone is behind you. Well, we're walking along, going across the bridge up a hill, and all of a sudden we hear loud footsteps on the bridge. I see light from what appeared to be his phone, going back and forth as if he was sprinting. We panicked. We start running, and I'm thinking his footsteps kind of sound like he was on a bike. I thought, we'll go up this steep hill on our left. No way this guy is following us, and no way they'll get up this hill on this bike. Turns out, there was no bike. We stopped running as we didn't hear anything. She flashes her light behind us, and there's a silhouette of a man jogging towards us, his body posture looking like he got tired from running. So we kept running and stopping to see if he was still chasing us, and then again we hear footsteps running towards us. We keep looking back while running to make sure that he's not right on us. At this point, my friend screamed, "Hey!" in a panicked voice, and he screamed back, "Hey!" Then after that said, "What, are you scared?" We keep running. She's on the phone with the police. We finally hit a paved road, nowhere near a car. When I took us up the hill, that was not the right path that we originally took. We knock on a house, lights are on, but no one answers. We start down the road to their neighbor. I look back and see a silhouette of a man walking behind the first person's house. He got up to the fence and creeped back into the darkness. That second neighbor helped us. His wife got us some water, and the police came and took us to her car. That was the most traumatic experience I think I've ever had. The intentions of the man felt sinister, and the way that he was yelling at us felt so uncanny. I hate this feeling I have, and I have so much questions that won't be answered. I can't get this one question out of my head. What if he caught up to us? I'm a 41-year-old female. I live in Montana, and a few years ago I was forced to relocate after my landlord decided to rent to her son. The community I had lived in for 11 and a half years had become incredibly expensive. Unfortunately, I was forced to relocate to another city, and because of this unexpected move and associated costs, I had to move in with a roommate. My roommate left to pursue better job prospects about 3 months after I moved in. Our unit was a triplex, so there were 2 gentlemen who inhabited the other 2 units. I was never added to the lease as the property manager required a full deposit, and I was not in a financially healthy spot at the time. I remained in the unit for a year and a half on my own, paying rent and utilities. I became very good friends with the man in the unit closest to mine. We'll call him Devin, a 52-year-old male. Devin was a disabled veteran in recovery. I also am a veteran, so he held a soft spot in my heart. We shared meals, hung out, and discussed all of life's mysteries, and would look out for one another. Devin had gone to treatment for 6 weeks, and I watched his cat while he was gone. Our friendship developed over the course of 1.5 years. Devin had expressed romantic interest. However, right from the beginning, I had clearly informed Devin that I did not share those feelings, and we would never be more than just good friends. Devin seemed to be lonely, which made sense. However, I am a person who requires alone time to recharge my batteries. I would catch him walking through the front yard multiple times a day to get the mail, which I believed was to see if I was outside so he could stop and chat. When I'd leave in the morning to go to work, Devin was always outside to tell me that I looked nice and have a good day. I told him that made me feel uncomfortable, and he should just send a text letting me know that he wanted to hang out and wait for a response. There were a couple times I yelled at him for overstepping my boundaries. The first, I had just got home and pulled into my garage. I was on a phone call and stayed in the car. Devin looked through the garage window to see if I was home. I was annoyed, but didn't really think too much of it. The second, I was getting dressed in my room in the summer, so the window was cracked. I felt this was safe as the window was not placed that anyone should be walking by, as it was on my patio on the back of my home. I caught Devin peeking through it. I lost it. I let Devin know under no certain terms his behavior was appropriate, and that if he didn't respect my boundaries, we would no longer be friends. Last year, while I was still at home, I asked Devin to watch my dogs for a couple days so I could go to a family event out of state. Devin was happy to help, and I was very appreciative. Not long after I returned, I started to notice strange things in my home, but I really just thought it was me. For instance, it was fairly certain that I had locked the door in the morning when I left for work, but when I returned, it would be unlocked. I would be sure that I had shut off all the lights, but when I got home in the evening, one would be on. I really just thought it was absent-mindedness. Fast forward a couple months. My mom became sick with cancer. My sister watched my dog while I went to tend to my mom. My sister reached out to me and asked me if anyone else had a key to the apartment. I let her know that she had the only spare key, and asked why. She said she experienced the same issues with the lights and locks. I had not shared my concerns with my sister prior to her communicating hers with me, as I really doubted my own sanity. While I was out of town, I received a text message from Devin asking if I had a potato he could borrow. I let him know that I was out of state with my mom, who was sick. Devin did not reply, which was out of character. but I had noticed a change in Devin's affect. He was more reserved and less friendly towards me. I thought it had to do with my firm adherence to my boundaries, which was okay. He didn't have to like them, just respect them. When I got back to town, one night I stayed over at my sister's house after helping her move. As mentioned above, I was struggling financially, so I would carefully budget and plan my weekly meals. The morning before my sister's move, I had placed 3 pieces of bacon in a Ziploc to be used later for a BLT. When I returned the following morning, much to my belief, there were only 2 pieces of bacon. I held the bag in my hands knowing that there had been 3. No longer did I doubt myself. I called my sister and let her know that someone had been getting into my house that I always kept locked. The only logical thing that could have happened is Devin made a copy of my key when he was watching my dog in the fall. My sister reminded me of the potato text. The potato in the counter basket was gone. I had enough information to be certain my neighbor has violated my trust and was no friend. However, I still wasn't afraid of him. As I mentioned, he is a disabled vet and was somewhat feeble and sickly. I was not scared of confrontation. I immediately went to a hardware store, purchased a camera that streams to your phone once the motion detector has been activated. I placed it facing the side door where Devin would enter. It also has two-way audio capability, so my plan was that when Devin decided to enter my home again, I would see it and say over the camera something to the effect of, "Get the fuck out of my house, put the key you copied on the counter, and never try to speak to me again, or I would contact law enforcement." As I wrote above, I was not on the lease and did not want to be homeless, so I could not turn to the property manager for help, and Devin knew it. In the evenings, I started placing a jug of cat litter and a kitchen chair in front of the door that I knew Devin was accessing, but I never expected he would attempt to come in while I was at home, and really, he had only taken a piece of uncooked bacon and a potato. Laying on the couch one night, watching TV, I thought I heard something sliding on the floor in the laundry room where the door was, but I knew there was no way that he would come in while I was home. My cat was running around playing, so I decided that it was probably just her, and that I was just being paranoid because of all that had happened. The next morning, while changing my laundry, I noticed the litter and chair had been pushed 3 to 4 inches. I checked the sensitivity of the camera and found that I was able to replicate by slowly opening the door. Devin had tried to come in while I was home. Why? That morning, I took bear spray into the shower with me while my knees knocked. I was terrified. I felt vulnerable and violated. Devin knew that I knew now also. He knew that I had placed a barrier in front of the door. After that morning, he never was outside in the morning, nor did he walk through the yard to get his mail. I obtained a firearm for protection and did make a police report. The police officer was annoyed with me as I didn't want them to approach Devin, as all Devin would need to do is report me to the property manager, and I would be homeless. I'm grateful that whatever he was up to was apparently prevented. The fact that he tried to come in when he knew I was home gives me the heebie-jeebies. I wonder if he went through my underwear, watched me while I slept. Since then, my situation has greatly improved. I ended up moving shortly after to take care of my mom. I got my own place again a few months ago. I never put my trust into another neighbor for a pet or house sitting again. It still blows my mind that I had some douchebag stealing from me and likely stalking me. This story just solidifies one should always trust their gut. There were so many times that a red flag was screaming, and I thought I was just being crazy. Hey all. So I just got back from a trip to New York City. I go there multiple times a year as I have family and a handful of close friends that live out there. Been meaning to post this since it happened a couple nights ago, but I wanted to make sure I had enough time to sit down and regather all the details correctly. I'm sure we've all heard crazy subway stories at one point or another, but I never thought I would end up in one this terrifying. So I was headed back to my hotel from a friend's house at about 3 a.m. My friend lives deep in Brooklyn. My hotel was in Manhattan. So if you know the city, you know that's about a 30 to 45 minute train ride, give or take. My train finally arrived and I was happy to be headed home. I was exhausted and it was late. My trip had been going unexpectedly well up to this point, so I had faith that I'd be able to get home with no worries, especially since the trains and streets were basically empty at this hour. The train was brand new and had just been cleaned, something I've never seen before. Hell, it even smelled like a new car, and still had fresh mop water on the floor. There's only about 3 other people on the train, all minding their business. So far, so good. About 2 stops into the train ride, a man that looked like he was in his 20s stumbled into the train mid-ride through the connecting door of the cars. He had on a Nike ski mask, which usually isn't a good sign on a 70-degree night in general context, but I'm not one to judge by appearance. Plus I knew the ski mask is sort of a trend nowadays, so I didn't think too much of it at first. He sort of hobbled in and he was clutching his stomach, almost as if he was concealing something or hiding a wound. His eyes were bloodshot red, and at first I thought it was because he was high or something. He immediately hobbled into the nearest corner and sort of sulked into that corner, facing it, until the next stop. He then ran out of the closest door and erupted in the most painful cry I've ever heard. He was just screaming, moaning, and crying, all while stumbling running alongside the stopped train on the platform, still clutching his stomach, screaming things like, "Why?" and gasping through the tears. Keep in mind, I'm sitting in the middle of the train, facing away from the side that he got off, so I'm kind of breaking my neck behind me as he's running behind me to watch what's going on. He then runs back inside the same car, through the door, on the opposite side of the car now. He was on my right side before, but now he's on my left. There's no one between me and him, since everyone else was closer to the right side. He did the sulking while facing into the corner thing, on the other side of the car now, but this time he kept screaming and crying and yelling things like, "Why?" But then he started crying hysterically that it was too hard for me to make out a lot of what he was saying. From the certain words I gathered though, I'm almost positive that a very close friend of his had gotten killed or something. It was the only thing that would explain the way he was acting and the things he was saying. Plus he was suited up like he had just came back from a street mission gone bad or something. At this point, everyone on the train is frantically flicking their eyes over to him every few seconds. You could tell that they were panicked, but not trying to cause a scene about it or rile him up anymore. I was getting a little sussed out myself, but I had seen and heard worse about the subway, and if someone he knew really just died, I honestly felt horrible for the guy before anything else. But then the entire situation escalated to a point that I have only seen in movies or crime shows until now. The man stayed in the corner crying, screaming, and muttering things to himself for another 3 minutes or so, all while clutching his stomach as if he was concealing something. I had definitely seen that black object in his hand by this point, but I couldn't tell if it was big enough to be a gun or not. After I saw this, I tried not to take my eyes off of him for too long at this time, since I was the closest person to him, but I also didn't want to stare. By this point, he started to say concerning things like, "Someone's got to pay for this," and then he would just repeat it louder and louder, and then he burst into dialogue that made my heart fucking drop. Keep in mind, he's still facing the corner, hunched over, clutching his item. "You motherfuckers sitting on this train right now, you're gonna feel me tonight. You hear me? Y'all gonna feel me tonight. Y'all gonna fucking hate it too. Oh my god, y'all gonna fucking hate this. Y'all gonna hate me." He kept getting louder and louder as he was saying this to the point where he was basically screaming by the last part. I don't know what he said after that, because as soon as the train stopped at the next stop, I fucking bolted. He was screaming shit at me as I got off, but I couldn't hear it, and I definitely wasn't trying to turn back. I ran to the nearest street exit, chain smoked a couple cigarettes, and waited the 20 minutes for the next train to come. I've seen enough in my life to know that that wasn't the situation I was willing to gamble with at all. I pray for the last 3 people on the train got home safe and nothing happened. I briefly searched the news and Twitter the next day for any possible info I could find, but didn't see anything. But who even knows what's worth the headline anymore? So to the man on the subway at 3 a.m., I pray that you find the solace you need to heal from whatever trauma you were going through. But please, let's never ever meet again.